Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you, and I'm really glad to be able to have this conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. I know lining up the times here in two different continents is not easy, but we're able to make it work. I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you. I definitely feel likewise. As I said to you kind of off air before, we're going to be having a chat today about a few things that will be coming up in this particular chapter of my new book. So we'll be talking a bit about legacy, a bit about self-care, and of course, a little bit about Gabby's journey as well.
Yeah.
I'd say by now, probably if you were to say the words Gabby Petito, I feel like most people worldwide would know who Gabby is, which is quite a beautiful thing. Before we talk, I guess, a bit about Gabby's journey, though, I just wanted to, I guess, ask you when people hear the words Gabby Petito, aside from thinking about coercive control, who do you want people to think of in terms of Gabby the human when they hear her name?
One, she was just a person. She wasn't a kid. She was an adult. I still always see her as a kid, but she was just like anybody else out there. She was an absolutely amazing human being. She really lit up a room anytime she came into it. She was absolutely awesome. Watching her grow up and was really inspiring to see a lot of the things that she was doing. I mean, she unfortunately her life was cut short. She'll be forever 22. It's hard to believe she was taken 5 years ago, almost now, but it's been 5 years. But she really lived her life. She was very goal oriented. When she wanted to do something, that she would find a way to do it. She was a phenomenal artist, and she was really just a great person. When I look back and I think about Gabby, I just think of that person. I think of that little blonde hair, blue eyed kid with her hair in pigtails, full of life, full of energy, and just always lit up the room whenever she walked in. And she was really awesome. Biologically, she was not my child, but I never referred to her any other way other than one of my children as my daughter. She was our
Mhm.
oldest of four. And, that was just also a testament to Gabby because she really loved and cared deeply for everybody in her life, especially her family.
Yeah, and when you said that, when you were talking about the way that she just lit up the room, I mean, that was one of the things that stood out to me when I watched the documentary. I just felt like her smile could light up the room. She just looked so full of light and laughter and just an amazing person. And I think probably, it would be fair enough to say that a lot of people probably felt that way watching the documentary and felt like we got to know her a little bit, which is why I thought it's always great to kind of start by coming back to who the person is as a person, not just the face of whatever cause they've kind of become. Now, obviously, Gabby has left such a legacy, and that's thanks to the amazing work that you and Nichole and Joe and Tara have done over the past, as you said, almost 5 years now. But I just wanted to ask with the Gabby Petito Foundation, what was the moment where you felt like you really needed or wanted to step into this space? Because a lot of grieving parents, you could excuse them for, I guess, either just trying to just trying to survive, just trying to survive and get through each day. What was it that made the four of you as as parents and step parents want to step up into this space and advocate? And can you take us into the moment where I guess you first got that idea and you were like, this is what we want to do.
Absolutely. And the one thing we talk about often is if there's a family out there, if there's a person who's gone through an incredibly terrible experience like we have, whatever journey you decide to take in the aftermath of what happened, that's fine. But there's no roadmap for it. There's no true guide to say this is what you must do or you shouldn't do. Grief is not linear. It changes and it looks different every single day. And if you want to go back to some semblance of a normal life, whatever that may look like after this, that's okay too. If you choose to, kind of become a recluse and not do anything, that's okay too. And it was really my wife, it was Nichole. She was really the one, like almost immediately after it happened, she was like, we have to do something. I just feel like that her story just impacted so many people. And we started receiving messages almost immediately on the same social media platforms that we had started initially to try to help get information and get the word out to find her. Not long after, we started receiving messages, not just from in the United States, but from around the world, from people who followed the story. They felt as though or saw in themselves Gabby, because her living the way she lived, like so many young people, they live their life on social media, right? And what you see on social media, oftentimes we see these individuals out there. We want to emulate their lives. It looks picture perfect. She seems so happy, only to see that in her life in particular, it ended in tragedy. And they started to realize those dynamics of relationships that they were in, and were able to get out of it, thankfully, and are now safe. And so we realized that our daughter's voice had been taken from her, but her light will never be diminished. And we had to continue to tell her story if it meant we could help at least one or two other people. And so almost immediately afterwards, we started the foundation, and we were really just kind of trying to find our way in the beginning. And I would say it was a little clumsy. It was a lot of learning as we go, and we continue to learn this day. But we knew that we had to do something to make sure that no other person or no other family goes through what we continue to go through this day. And so we work hard in advocating for missing persons and their families, helping elevate those stories, and trying to figure out where we fit into the domestic violence space. And there's a lot of very necessary resources that are needed for somebody who's experiencing intimate partner violence or even sexual violence. And all those resources are overtaxed as it is. The demand for their services is going up each and every day. Here in the United States, a lot of the funding from the government that helps provide those services is kind of in jeopardy. And we figured looking into it, where we're not a direct service provider, we can't directly help people. We don't have a lot of those certifications or the means to do it. So we started focusing in prevention and education. And we feel that if we can get out there and if we're using Gabby's story plus the knowledge that we've learned through this process, that hopefully we can reduce the demands for those services. We can help missing loved ones bring their families home, or get some information that they need to try to help them in that situation, and to try to end to this worldwide epidemic. Really, it's not just, it's everywhere, of domestic violence, through hopefully educating. And that's kind of the journey that we've been on. And I think because we have four parents doing it, that's what allows us to fight as hard as we're doing. I don't think if there wasn't four of us who all come from very different backgrounds, all kind of specialize in four different things, if we didn't have that, I don't think we would be able to do what we're doing.
I agree. I think it would be a lot harder. My heart really goes out to when I see parents, especially who are advocating for their, the causes that their children passed away from, whether whatever it is, whether it's cancer, whether it's domestic violence, and I see, say, a single parent, I just think it's such a weight to carry. And I know that advocacy, we can be fueled by our passion and that takes us so far, but it's really hard when you're one person. I just think your family is so incredible. And I've seen this discussed on TV segments, just, kind of how unique your family is. And like you said in the beginning, Gabby was your daughter. You didn't see her as a stepdaughter. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about your family. And so refreshing also to see a family that is working together because you don't always see that. You
No.
mentioned in the beginning when you got started that you kind of did fumble your way through it a little bit, and that was interesting because I was going to ask you about whether there was anything, I guess, that surprised you in the early days of advocacy or anything that maybe was particularly challenging, because it's always great for aspiring advocates to hear what the journey's like. So, yeah, I'm interested if there was anything in particular that maybe was more challenging or surprising when you first got started.
So we work in two areas that are incredibly complex and very involved. And we had no idea getting into it just how involved these things are. We were familiar with our case, with our daughter, and what we experienced, only to find out that there's so many layers to it. It's really like an onion, especially when we get into domestic violence. And so, kind of going along this journey, we kind of started unfolding a lot more things and learning more and more about it, and realizing like we really have to kind of dive into a lot of things, and just how difficult it is for somebody who's experiencing some form of abuse, on how to get out, and all the many different areas that they have to go to try to safely get out, and how difficult it is to navigate that. And learning all of that stuff, like, I had no idea. And that was one of the things we talk about. I did a training today. I did two separate 4-hour trainings for a multidisciplined audience. My afternoon class, I had over 30 police recruits at a police academy in the class. So I was really excited about that, and having them in there, but just truly understanding all the dynamics. And then the more and more we get into it, a lot of the topics that we have difficulty talking about or we don't want to talk about in our society, I found that they kind of all overlap. And so we often don't want to talk about mental health that has often has a as a part in abuse. We don't often want to talk about even substance abuse issues. Sometimes that comes into play. We don't talk about domestic or sexual violence at home. All those things kind of come together. And even going further and further into it, even realizing things like human trafficking, we're starting to find a lot of these things are all interconnected, and a lot of the systems are still very much operating separately, where we're very siloed in what we do, where law enforcement might be in this silo and firefighters and paramedics might be in this silo, and our judiciary and prosecutors may be in this silo, and we're all kind of working independently of each other instead of working together. And I would say oftentimes we're kind of handcuffed a little bit in our approach to these things because of all these levels of system that are in place. And so trying to work your way through that and then try to navigate all of those different professions and try to figure out how to connect with each one of them to show the importance of why we all have to work together, I think has been one of the things that really kind of shocked me learning about some of this stuff. I just had faith in a system that I really never interacted with before, thinking, well, everything is just supposed to work a certain way, only to find out that oftentimes it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I started my advocacy back in around 2010, and that was starting with advocating around human trafficking awareness, and then moving into mental health and suicide prevention and domestic violence, and yeah, seeing that they're all very, very separate. But what I noticed, which you mentioned as well, is that mental health really comes back to the core of everything,
Yeah,
whether somebody's a perpetrator or they're a victim. Often things come back to mental health. I mean, I know America in particular, I mean, it's not like Australia's doing very great in terms of mental health care here, but I do know that it's, from what I've seen and heard, it's particularly challenging in the States, and there can be
it
a lot
is.
of challenges there.
There's just not enough
So,
resources out there, and there's a demand for the system, and
no.
it's a lot of these topics are uncomfortable, and we don't like to be
Yeah.
uncomfortable. We don't like to have these uncomfortable conversations. So oftentimes we like to think, well, it's not really affecting us, or it's not
Yeah.
big that big of an issue, and really just kind of peeling those layers back and saying, we all have a piece of this. We all need to take part in this and do what we can to try to improve it. It's huge.
Absolutely. And you were talking a little bit before about the work that you have done, and even just today, the work that you've been doing with first responders, which is just brilliant. I mean, it's so needed here in Australia. We've been trying to work on educating our police force and our first responders more about, especially the warning signs of emotional abuse and coercive control, because it's still not as understood as it needs to be. And too many times we see victims failed and told essentially to go home, like it's not a big deal. And then sadly we see another homicide. Um, in your story and in your family's experiences, obviously we've seen through the documentary that that lack of education amongst police was one of the leading factors that led up to Gabby's death.
Mhm.
We've seen the police cam footage, the body footage. Sorry, I can't think of the word right now.
The
The
body
the
can't.
body cam footage where police had been told by witnesses that they'd seen her partner abusing her in public, but yet when they pulled them over, they misidentified Gabby as the perpetrator. Probably a question you've been asked over and over, but when you first saw that footage, how did that how did that feel to see that?
So we saw that pretty much the same time as the rest of the world did. We were aware
Wow.
of what occurred on August 12th, 2021. What was told to us that day by our daughter was far different than what actually occurred. And when the body cam footage had dropped in the news on September 16th, that was the first time that we truly saw that that incident was a lot more involved than what we were initially told. And even in that moment, I don't think I realized, and she was actively still missing at that point. We'd not found her yet. I don't think I put two and two together that this was domestic violence related. We had no idea what coercive control was when we, I would say for myself in particular, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but what I believe to be domestic violence is what you often see on TV and in the media, how it's oftentimes like glorified and sensationalized, and it's all physical, right? It's all physical. A person hits another person that they're in this relationship to, and that's what it is, and not understanding just how these relationships, they don't start physical typically, right?
Yeah.
If you were to go out on a date with somebody and as you're sitting there having dinner, if they punch you on the first date, you just most likely not going to be a second date, certainly not going to be
Something
any,
I
right?
think I've said over and over in presentations, it's like if somebody comes out with, slapping or hitting you on the first date, you wouldn't go back. And that's
Yeah, or
why coercive control is so insidious.
and
That
even,
doesn't
you know,
start that way.
no, and saying something bad about you, whatever it might be, it doesn't start,
Mm.
and so, but coercive control and these non-physical forms of abuse, when we talk about domestic violence, it's about gaining and maintaining power and control and how we do that. And
Yeah.
it's an escalation, and it's a pattern. And it starts with these non-physical controlling forms. And looking back on it with Gabby, not understanding it at the time or knowing that they were red flags, we look back and saw that there was a lot of these non-physical forms of abuse, this coercive control that he was doing to slowly gain and maintain power and control over her. And even here in the States, there's only a few places where coercive control is technically a crime, albeit like a misdemeanor, like a very low level, but it's really not for probable cause to make an arrest. Really, all it is to help get that person a protective order, which is just a piece of paper saying, stay away, um, and start hopefully building something towards either helping get them out of the situation or eventual prosecution. But we oftentimes overlook this. And doing this work that we've been doing now, we've had a chance to work with a lot of survivors. One of them is like a great friend of ours. She was in a really bad abusive relationship well over 30 years ago. And thankfully, she got out and she's safe now. And she has a great husband now and family, and she'll tell you that, I mean, she was both psychologically as well as physically abused. 30 years later, she'll tell you that the bumps, the bruises, all of that stuff is healed. But what still has scarred her
Yeah.
to this day was that psychological trauma that she endured. There are certain sounds, certain smells instantly trigger her brain and bring her back to those moments of abuse. And we overlook these patterns often. And if we can begin to identify them and start recognizing them long before that hopeful physical abuse starts, we can start saving lives. And really, we got to start looking at it right there, right from the root, right from that coercive control, and start attacking it right from that point, not after the it escalates into violence.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was, I think, one of the main reasons why I created the Red Flags 101 program was because we, the best chance we have of preventing future homicides or future abuse and trauma is to empower people as early as possible to know what those warning signs are, to spot them, and to put up boundaries that keep themselves safe. Because otherwise, you know, sometimes you can be lucky, and I say lucky, but I think of your friend, she's still living with those scars. She
Mhm.
was lucky to escape with her life, but the impact can still be lifelong. But in other
Absolutely.
cases, we see coercive control can also escalate so quickly before the person even has the opportunity to get out. So I just applaud the work that you're all doing, and I'm so glad that you're also working with police. What has been I guess, what has been the general kind of response that you've seen working with first responders? Has it
So
been mostly
it's
positive so far?
mostly positive, surprisingly very supportive and positive. I worked in the fire service for 25 years. I was a firefighter early on for a really long time. I was both a career and a volunteer firefighter. I was an officer in my career fire department. I was a training instructor. I did EMS for a long time. So I've done a very similar job. And so when I come in and I do our trainings, I understand I worked in a very type A personality, a very male dominated profession. And I never ever appreciated when we would bring in somebody to do training, and whether it be an hour or 4 hours or whatever it is, to sit in a room and have somebody tell you how you're doing your job wrong or how you need to do your job better. A lot of times you instantly get turned off. And unfortunately, it's not always the message. Sometimes it's the messenger too who's coming in, who's up there and talking about these things. And we shouldn't think that way, but we do. It's one of those like, if you've never done my job, how are you going to tell me how to do my job better? Even though there's a lot of folks out there with a tremendous amount of experience, sometimes we just get shut down when it's not one of us. And so when I walk into these trainings, I walk in there, I don't at any point do anything to blame anybody for anything. I actually use myself as the example. I use myself as how I've unintentionally made mistakes in my life, both as a parent, as a father, and a husband, and in my profession, unintentionally made some of these mistakes. And now I come to you from this position where I don't ever want anybody in the room to feel one single ounce of what I'm feeling, oftentimes on these days. And so I've had a really good reception, from the audience on it. I'm sure there's some folks that walked away and said, that guy, he just here just telling us a sad story or something like that. And it's incredibly tragic and sad
Right.
story. But I look at it as the lens. I give you the lens from a first responder, and I give you the lens as a parent, as the family of a homicide victim. And it's a really interesting perspective. And just today, and I'm a very humble person. I had somebody come up to me today and he said, I've been in law enforcement for over 30 years. I've sat in probably hundreds of hours of these classes. I will tell you the training I had today, I've heard some of that stuff. I've never heard it presented the way that you presented it today. I learned so much in my 30 years today, and I only wish that I would have learned some of these things 30 years ago in policing because I would have done things a lot differently over the last 30 years.
Wow.
And so for me, it was really heartwarming. And that's what all I want. Give me one person in the room to change. And I always say it's a ripple effect. And all waves start small, right? They all start small. But if I can get one person in the room and they can go back to their agency and maybe they can change one other person and look at these calls a little bit differently and another person, that wave gets bigger and bigger. And then once it comes crashing down, it has a huge impact. And so it's really gone pretty well. I used to develop training courses for firefighters and stuff. And through the process, I realized not only are we siloed, but in my profession, I was responding on these calls over the years and I had zero training. I had no training whatsoever on it. And I spent a career trying to educate myself. I never wanted to come across a situation where I didn't know what to do or who to call. And if I came upon something like that and I wasn't sure, I would then look to find a way to educate myself. And when it came to these calls for violence, I just treated it like any other call. I didn't know how to refer somebody. I didn't know what like victim centric interviewing was or trauma informed care. I was kind of
Yeah.
doing it already in other spaces. If I was dealing with a child or somebody like that, I wouldn't come to them the same way and ask them questions the same way as I would an adult oftentimes. So I was kind of doing it, but I didn't realize that we also kind of had to change the way we're doing things for somebody who's experiencing this type of trauma in their life. And I
Yeah,
really,
there just wasn't that education,
it wasn't
you
there.
know.
And so I spend my time now saying, listen, there's a 7-letter curse word in our work as first responders that we don't like, and it's the word mandate. Nobody likes the word
Mhm.
mandate because it means you're forcing me to do something. You probably don't really understand my job fully. I'm kind of doing this stuff already. Why do I have to change? And you're making me do all these things, and you're not giving us any money to do it. So why do I have to do it? And so I'm trying to get out ahead of all that stuff and just get everybody in the room together and realize every single one of us plays a very important role in this. And if we're not having the same education across the board, we're creating huge gaps in the system that people are falling through every single day.
Yeah. And that feedback that you got today just shows you the incredible difference that you're making. And I'm sure you get messages like that quite frequently, but it is helpful for those of us outside of these spaces or who aren't working, say, with first responders to hear how they're actually taking this information in and that they are open to it. And I'm sure there are a lot that are very open and they want to have this education so that they can make a difference. So I think that's just wonderful. When it comes to, I guess, the coercive control education side of things, whether it's, if you sort of step out and kind of look at I guess, the education you're doing in other spaces as well, not just with first responders, is there anything you've learned over the last 5 years or so about about specific examples of coercive control that maybe are a little bit newer, or maybe they're not as well understood, thinking about things like the rise in tech abuse and things like that. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you could maybe give an example of that the public might go, oh, wow, I didn't actually know a lot about that?
Absolutely. So when we talk about coercive control in general and those non-physical forms of abuse and those red flags, we often talk about like the love bombing, the quick attachment, financial abuse, isolation, gaslighting, and all that other stuff. But as the world is evolving and changing, technology is coming into play more and more. And technology is absolutely amazing, right? Right now, it's already changed. And by the time we wake up, well, you're already awake. By the time I wake up tomorrow morning, and you'll probably be going to bed, it's already changed again. And so when we think of things like stalking, oftentimes we think it was, the creepy person in the bushes, kind of following. Well, that's not what it's like anymore. The world is at our fingertips and technology is great. And there's a lot of apps out there like these Life 360s and different things where we can track and follow our kids, really meant for good, but a lot of these things can be used for harm too. So there's different things in there that I've seen or I've heard that have occurred with folks, especially with all the smart devices that we have in our homes, whether it's TV or the things that control our thermostats and temperature in our house. And so I've heard things where abusers, whether they've separated or they're not home, and they're able to do things like turn the heat on or turn the heat off, or change the air conditioning in the house, or mess with the lighting in the house, or shut the Wi-Fi off, or being able to tap into other devices inside their home and listen, and or tap into the camera systems on different devices in the home and spy on folks. And then really kind of making them really think like they're going crazy while they're in the house because all of
Wow.
these things have happened and they have no idea what it's doing. And this person is intentionally doing it to them. And so just understanding that there's all these different tools and things and technology is amazing, but the bad people are also finding ways to use it to continue to control and abuse these folks in different ways and really just kind of gaslight them and manipulate them.
I was going to say, it feels like the ultimate form of gaslighting where you actually think you're going crazy when all the things are turning on in your house. You don't know what's going on. Um,
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're like, oh, how bad could that be? But really, when they start doing it enough, the person really starts to question like their sanity, their
yeah.
memory. Like, am I going crazy right now? And then them playing into it, going, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I'm home. I never have an issue. Or, when I was there was never a problem. And so
Mm,
really just kind of like messing with them a lot with those things. And they're things that we would never really think of. I say like right now, I can pick up my phone. My wife and I are in two different states. I can tell you exactly where my wife's car is. I can tell you that she just had an oil change done in the car. I can tell you how much gas she has in the car. I can turn her car on. I can turn it off. I can set the car alarm off. I can do all those things right here off of my phone. And so there's just different ways that they can really, really get to you and continue to cause really further harm on you.
yeah.
So it's really pretty crazy.
Thank you for sharing that because I hadn't actually heard of any of those specific examples before. I think here in Australia, we've been hearing more about the rise of bank facilitated abuse. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but when the ex partner can't say but they can't get to the victim anymore. For example, they don't have their phone number, they can't send them messages there. They'll start sending maybe just little amounts, like $1 through bank transfer, but they'll put a message in with it where you can fill in the description. So they're
Yeah.
sending abusive messages along with, say, 50 cents or $1. And that has been really hard for banks to crack down on. I remember when I heard that, I was just like, wow, like had not thought of that. And it was actually happening to another advocate that is in my world. And I think he was doing it to their daughter as well to try to punish her because she wasn't
Con-
going along with
Conforming to his ideology.
she wasn't going along with his requests. Um, Another one I heard, which was at a International Women's Day event I was at several years ago. They had a tech expert there, and he was sharing some great things, kind of similar to what you've said about the ways that tech can be used to facilitate abuse and stalking and all those things. But one really interesting thing he brought up was the rise of, or the ability for perpetrators to continue tracking their victims via Facebook Marketplace.
Mhm.
which I'm a very private person. I always make sure if I'm going on a trip or I'm going away for work, I don't post about anywhere until I've left there. That's just me. I've always been that way. Facebook Marketplace, I always try to be pretty careful about what I post. I'm not showing anything about the house, but he showed some great examples of, yeah, how easy it is for somebody who's a perpetrator to look at, like find if the person's selling anything on there, and then they can look in the listing and see if you might have mentioned exactly what suburb you're in, which a lot of people do. I always try to avoid that. Then I think this person had put up a photo of an item, say, in front of their garage. So, how easy is it then to do a reverse image search and see if you can get the outside of that house? Then you know what house they're in. Then you can look at the whole floor plan. You know everything about the house, all the entry points, exit points. And I was like, wow, it's quite scary.
And that was one of the things I was gonna say too is, just, them posting pictures online and stuff, like, they can that
Yeah.
reverse image search, they can pull out one small minute detail, and they have that exact location of where you are. And when it's used for good,
Yep.
it's a great thing. So we've done some stuff with, some missing persons cases where there's been folks investigating missing persons, and they've been able to do that reverse image search to help try to
Yep.
locate potential sightings. But for everything that's we try to do good, there's somebody who finds a way to
Yeah.
use it for evil.
Absolutely. So I think, also being open about these things is really important. It's never about victim blaming, it's always about empowering. And so hopefully anybody that like anyone who's watching this, if they recognize that there's some areas here where they can tighten their security, I always recommend that. I'm a huge advocate when it comes to not sharing our children's faces online, but at the very least, please don't put up images of your children in their school uniforms, awards they're holding that tell you what school they go to, what year they're in, who their teacher is, what their favorite items are, because these can all be used for bad as well.
Yeah.
But as you said, tech's changing all the time, and we just have to be as aware as possible. Just slightly changing topics. When it comes to, I guess, coming back to the advocacy side of things, one thing I've been really interested to ask you about is how you and your family deal really with all of the trolls. Does it impact you less today than it did in the beginning? Are there certain things you do now that you didn't do to take care of yourself?
I can't speak for all of us, but I can tell you one thing is I don't ever read comments. I don't read comments. Again, to use social media, it's a great tool, but I also know that it's a place where oftentimes people say things or feel empowered to make comments on things that they probably wouldn't normally say to somebody's face.
Mm.
And oftentimes, most of them are uneducated. They don't understand the full dynamics of it. We live very much in a victim blaming society where we can armchair quarterback, a lot of things. You should have done this, or why didn't you do that? And never being in that situation that most of these families, these victims, are in. They I'll tell you for myself, I have a lot of blame on myself all the time. I have a lot of guilt, and I work through it through a lot of different ways, but I don't pay attention to them. I really don't. You can't change the opinion of everybody. We know the truth, and we've heard it all. We continue to hear some things to this day, but I don't pay any attention on it. I try not to stay in the negative. I try to stay positive. Think about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and just stay on that and stay focused on that. And then when I'm out in public and we're doing our trainings and we're doing our advocacy work, just that, trying to do our best to educate the masses. Because really, when you talk about two crimes around the world that immediately we blame the victim, I can't really think of too many others, but the two I can think of is domestic and sexual violence. All
Yeah.
right, because there's not enough education out there about it. And so domestic violence, right away, the victim is to blame. Well, why don't you just leave? If you don't tell me, then there's nothing I can do to help you. You deserve it if you're just going to sit there and take this abuse, not knowing all the dynamics into it, that coercive control and all that other stuff, and how the neurobiology affects your brain, how your brain gets rewired. And sexual assault is no different. Right away, we blame the victim. Well, what were you wearing? Were you
Mm.
drinking? Why were you there? If somebody breaks into your home, nobody comes to you and says, Could you tell me if you were drinking at the time this person broke into your home?
What were you
Or
wearing when they broke
tell
in?
me what you were wearing? I don't know. Why does that matter? Well, maybe what you were wearing was the cause of them breaking into your home. No, nobody says that. It's a burglar. They're bad. They stole your jewelry. Bad person, right? But domestic and sexual violence, right away, it's their fault. It's the victim's fault.
Yeah.
And not truly understanding the dynamics, not understanding neurobiology, trauma, what happens to the brain, not understanding these things. And so you still have these people out there with this misconception in their brain on what it truly is to be in one of these situations. And so we ignore it. And then we spend a lot of time doing self care for ourselves, which is really huge because there's no other way to be able to continue to get
Mm.
through it.
And how do you and Nichole especially keep, I guess, keep that spark alive in your relationship as a couple, not just as, joint partners in Gabby Petito Foundation? Like, how do you protect your relationship when you're in the weeds doing all this really hard work together as well?
Well, it's pretty interesting. We just had our 21st wedding anniversary. We've been together for 25 years, so a quarter century together. That's a testament to her because I
That's
am
amazing.
basically I'm like her fifth child. And she always says that the reason why our marriage was successful over all these years was because I used to do shift work. I used to work for 24 hours at a time, and then she would get to bed all by herself with the dogs and stuff like that, and be home with the kids and could watch what she wanted on TV. Well, now I'm kind of home a lot more when I'm not traveling, and so that's added like an interesting dynamic to it. But we know that when we're in the office and we're doing this work, that's work time to be doing this. She's technically my boss now, and I mean she's always my boss. She's my wife, but that's that time. But then like when we leave that office and we walk out, like we're husband and wife, we're mom and dad, and we are
Yep.
intentional with our kids. We are there and we're disconnected, and that's what we're doing. We make sure that we take time for each other, take time for ourselves. If my wife wants to go and have a girls' night out because she just needs a night out, you got it. I'm home. Our kids are a little bit older,
Mhm.
so it's easier, but you got it. You have at it. Or, we want to take the kids out or for dinner or something. All right, we're going to go. We're going to go to a movie. We're going to go do this, and that's what we do. We just kind of disconnect from all of this. Certain things that you can't change, things that are always with you, but we just make sure that we're there for our other children, intentional and in the moment in our relationships with them too. And it's unfortunately, when a family goes through something like this, the rate of divorce afterwards is
Yeah.
exponential. But we found a way. I think it's actually made us stronger as a couple and as a family as well. So definitely a lot of growth over the last few years.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that because I mean that is something that came to mind for me as just the high rates of divorce in families that go through losing a child or losing a loved one. And it's understandable, but it's really sad. So congratulations on your recent anniversary. And I'm really glad that you guys take that time for yourself as well and to be with family.
Congratulate her. Don't congratulate me. It's a testament to her. Me, I'm like, "Wow, it was pretty easy, this whole
Good
thing," but
work, Nicole.
she's great.
Yeah. Sort of similar to that sort of what we were just talking about with the impact that it can take on relationships and also on ourself as well and our own mental health. You and I were having a chat recently and you mentioned that there was a couple here in Australia that had reached out to you over the past few years. And I said it was probably Sue and Lloyd Clark because their daughter Hannah, who was murdered in I think it was 2020 or 2021. Hopefully, I'm not getting it wrong. I think it was 2020. Hannah and her three children were murdered. Although there have been a lot of high or higher profile cases, I feel like Hannah Clark has kind of been, I guess, like the Australian version of Gabby Petito in a way. And I'd say it was probably the Clarks that reached out to you. They just recently announced that they are stepping back from the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation. And a lot of us applauded them for recognizing that they needed to and for choosing to step back and prioritize their other children and grandchildren to really just recoup. Have you and Nichole and the rest of the family ever talked about or thought about what would need to occur if there was a time where you needed to step back? Have you sort of made a plan of what that would look like or what warning signs maybe you'd need to be aware of that would tell you that it's time to step back?
So and we've had some moments throughout the last 5 years where, any one of us at a given time have been kind of overwhelmed and where we're like, you know what, I need to take a break from this. Like,
Yeah.
I can't look at this anymore. I can't do this right now. Or I just need help right now. And one of the other parents have kind of stepped in and supported that person. I know my wife I travel a lot doing this training. I had no idea that when I built out this program and I started doing it, that it was really going to have an impact and be as requested as it is. So, like this year, I'll probably be on the road like 25 to almost 30 weeks out of the year throughout
Wow.
throughout the course of the calendar year doing this. And my wife had initially been doing a lot of traveling and speaking and stuff like that, and she's kind of like stepping back a little bit from just going out and doing like keynotes and stuff like that. It's very hard for her to consistently kind of tell the story over and over again and what we've learned. And so she's kind of taken a step back from that, and we're like, okay, you got it. Like, absolutely, you don't have to do that. And so where she and Tara are kind of more focusing on like school based education programs, and so they're like, all right, if we're going to be going someplace and doing something, we'd rather focus our energy on that a little bit more. And it's a whole kind of different presentation that they're doing. And we're like, absolutely, then do that. That's what you want to do. And if you want to step back from that, like that's okay too. We slowly started to kind of bring in some other folks too to kind of start helping us to do some of these different things. And I think as the foundation continues to grow, people will ask, "What's your five-year plan? What's the 5-year goal for the foundation?" I said, "That's simple. Put us out of business. Solve the
Yeah.
problem. Fix the problem. I'll go find something else to do. I understand sea turtles need to be rescued or something. I will go to the beach because I love the beach and I will go rescue sea turtles. I'll find something to do." And so if we need to start kind of stepping back a little bit and we still want to continue the foundation and the legacy of our daughter, we are starting to make sure that we bring in like very trusted people to kind of make sure that they're like-minded and goal driven like us to want to continue to do the work. We haven't really gotten to a point where we're like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. All four of us kind of specialize in our own different area. Joe, Gabby's father, he does a lot of legislative work here. He calls these elected officials and they answer the phone, and he has a uncanny ability to be able to communicate and get his point across, and has made some really great changes across the country. Nichole and Tara do a lot in the school-based stuff now. They're doing really amazing work there. I'm working in this like first responder world, and so we all have our own little niche where we're kind of really working in, and we're thankful for that. So all of the workload isn't like on one person or two people. It's kind of
Yeah.
spread out amongst others, and that's
And
really
again, that's the really special thing I think about your family, and maybe makes it a little bit easier in some ways, but it's great. Like, it's good to hear as well that you can all help buffer the load for each other, and if someone needs to step out, that's fine, and hopefully sooner than later, you all can move on and do something else because there's not, as you said, there's not a need for this anymore. I mean, that's the ultimate goal for anybody that's in especially coercive control education. Um, Sorry, I was just thinking I had a whole bunch of stuff going through my head.
oh, no
Um,
worries.
Thinking about, I guess, just sort of coming towards the end of the interview. Obviously, the Gabby Petito Foundation and Gabby's legacy is a huge part of everything you do, and it's a huge passion for you to continue her legacy. But when you think of the word purpose, which is something that I'm discussing in one of the final chapters of my new book, what does purpose mean to you, and what do you see your purpose as, both within the foundation and outside of it?
That's a great purpose, and we kind of have a little line. I'm sure others use something very similar. We're turning pain into purpose, and I think one of like the biggest things, the way I look at it is, especially having three other children, is life is not easy, right? Life is difficult, and oftentimes we're going to come across a lot of challenges in our life, in our career, whatever it might be. And I want my children and other people to see that just because something completely tragic and terrible can happen to you, that doesn't define you, and
Mm.
that you can still overcome these things. and even take something so horrible, so negative, and try to make good out of it and find your purpose in doing it. And I think that's what we're doing is just trying to show that I like to use the word like post traumatic growth, that it didn't define you, that it has made you stronger in a way, stronger than when you before you this all happened. And I would say our purpose is to just really show folks like, unfortunately we can't stop all the bad stuff out there, but it doesn't have to define you. We can overcome this. We can continue to be driven in life. And if your mission in life changes after something like this, your purpose may look different, but just know that you can do it. And it's yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering it really the right way. I got so many thoughts in my head, but really
No,
just
it really it hits home, but I guess one of the things I was curious about too is sometimes when we go through things that are so awful, we throw ourselves into, just as the four of you have, advocating to create change in that area. But then sometimes if, as you said, if there wasn't a need anymore for coercive control education and things change, sometimes some people can then find that they feel lost because they're like,
yeah.
what's my purpose now? And that's why I asked you what your purpose would be inside and outside. And I think what you said about just finding a way, like finding a space in the world where you can turn pain into purpose, whatever that
Yeah,
is a great vision to have around that, or a great viewpoint to have.
absolutely. And we'll, if we somehow solve this problem, if we're able or we're unable to continue to do what we're doing, well, there'll be something else in life for us. I know that for me, it's little small wins each day. Um, I'm I'm not a deeply religious person. I'm very spiritual. Um, and I'll tell you, traveling across the country, I meet a lot of people. And I was in an airport one day. It was a Sunday morning, and I was leaving Virginia, and I had to get to the airport a little bit early, and my flight was delayed because that's been a nightmare for us lately over here.
Yep.
And yeah, it's terrible. It's been terrible lately, but
I've heard of these stories.
as a whole, I've slept in airports. It's been really, really bad. Like, and so on this day, I was in this airport in Virginia, and it was a Sunday, and football for us. The NFL is on, so my football team is playing. I'm sitting at a little bar restaurant, and the place is now packed, and there's only one seat open next to me at the bar. And this lady comes walking up, and she has a Starbucks coffee, and she was like, "Hey, I got a really really long flight. I'm just trying to get in there. I just want a little shot of Bailey's for my coffee for my flight." I'm like, "Hey, like judge free zone. Like this is the airport, right? Like that's one of the best drinks you can get in the world is like an airport drink, right? Doesn't matter the hour or the day." And I said, "Well, it might be a little bit. The bartender is real busy here." I was like, "You might as well pull up a stool. It's going to take a bit." And so she sat down next to me, and we started chit chatting back and forth. And she said, "Do you live here in Virginia?" I said, "No, I was just here for work. What do you do for work?" And I was like, um, "Here we go. This usually gets a little interesting."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I do training. I train first responders in domestic violence prevention." And she's like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. I used to be a first responder." And she said, I pivoted. I got married. I went into a different business. And then during COVID, because I was in the restaurant business, we had to shut down the restaurants. So my husband at the time and I, we started traveling across the country, and we bought a van, and we were traveling all over the place during COVID. During that trip, my husband, who was already kind of abusive, in a way, but not physical, on this van trip across the country, became very
Wow.
physically abusive. And she was like, "I don't know if you remember the story of that girl, Gabby Petito, but I was in the same area as her when that occurred. And I realized that he was probably going to kill me like that guy killed Gabby Petito." And I said, "This is going to get really uncomfortable in a second." And I reached into my bag, and I usually keep like we have the little bracelets and stuff, and then we have like these challenge coins and things. And I took out a bracelet and I took out a coin and I said, "I want to give this to you." I said, "Gabby is my daughter." And she like stopped and looked at me, and she was like, "Stop it." And I was like, "No, I'm not. That's my daughter." And she starts crying like in this airport, middle of this bar restaurant, and now everybody's looking at us, and I'm like, "Oh boy, like
They're
it's
like, "What
okay."
did you do? Made this lady cry."
And she was like, "You have no idea what this means at this moment right now." She said, I was living in Virginia when all that was occurring. She was like, "I finally got out. I was finally able to get divorced." She said, "I moved away. I moved across the country. This is the very first time since I divorced him that I've been back in Virginia. And I came back. My daughter's in college here, and I came here to visit her. I told nobody I was coming. This morning, before I left for the airport, my ex husband found me and he was begging me to come back and telling me all the things I wanted to hear. And he was going to get help and he was going to do better and he wasn't going to be abusive anymore. And he wasn't going to do all of these things to me anymore. And he begged me not to leave." And she said, "The entire way to the airport, I was crying, asking God for a sign. Please give me a sign. I don't know what to do. I'm so confused right now." And then I walked into this airport and I sat down next to you, the only open seat in this entire restaurant. And I think I got my sign. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Absolutely." I said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to get on that freaking plane." And I said, "I really think that's a great idea." And she did. And she still maintains contact with me. And for me, for everything that we continue to go through, knowing that it impacted one person, sometimes you do this work, you never ever get to see the people that you're helping. But to have that feedback in that moment leads us to believe we're still moving in the right direction. And I know if we've had that impact here, no matter where we go from here, we can have just as big of an impact in anything else in this world.
I'm just fighting back tears because that is such an incredible story, and yeah, it's impossible not to see that as a sign. That's just absolutely incredible. I'm so glad that she not only that Gabby's legacy helped her to get away, but that then she also met you. I thought, wow, that's just yeah, just such a sign. And kind of it was exactly what I was going to ask you just previously was about if there was one story that had really made an impact on you, and I think that's the one. One final question that I'd love to ask you before we wrap up, and it's
Absolutely.
a little bit of a deep one, but it kind of comes from what you were just sharing then. And it's hard for me to ask because I know it must be a difficult question too, but if you could have one more day with Gabby and you could share with her all the things that have happened in the world since or the legacy her story has left, what would you say to her?
Uh, First and foremost, I would just tell her that I love her more than anything else. I'd give her a huge, huge hug. And I would tell her that I'm so proud of her and that we really miss her. I know she's probably looking down on us. She's a very, very strong spirit. And so much has gone on in the world, but some of it seems real trivial with her not being here. And I'll say pretty often, if I could trade places, if I could trade places with her, even if it meant she could only be on this earth for 15 more minutes with her mom and her brothers and sisters, I would. I would trade that just so she could be here with the people that loved and cared for her so much. But I know that's not possible. And I would just tell her how proud we are of her. And I know her, what she would probably say, "Why are you making a big deal about me? Why are people still talking about me? Oh my goodness, you're embarrassing me." But I hope that she would be proud of us too and happy that we're trying to help others in her honor and that she had such a big impact on this world.
I know she would. I know she would be so proud of all of you. And probably, as you said, probably embarrassed in like a Netflix documentary. Like, what the hell? But
Oh my God.
she, her spirit was so bright. And I just felt that from, I think, the moment I first saw the very first photo of her that would have gone out in the news. I am just, yeah, immensely grateful for the work that you and Nichole and Tara and Joe do. It's such difficult work, and I hope there is a day where you can get out there and start rescuing sea turtles and doing all kinds of other cool things, exploring new passions, and I'm sure there will come a time. But for however long, you continue to do this work, as you said before, like, the impact that you've already had. That woman in the airport, that's if all of it was just to help that one person, you already know that you've made a difference. So thank you. And thank you from all of us in Australia too. I know there's a lot of people that have followed Gabby's story. And I'm really, yeah, really appreciate your insights and really looking forward to being able to share some of those in the book, but in the meantime, having people be able to watch this interview, get some new insights, especially into those new forms of coercive control and how it's morphing. And yeah, I just thank you and appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I appreciate everybody all the way out there in Australia. We do have a good friend that lives out in Australia, and I think in the New South Wales area. And it's funny because he says all the time, I don't know how you live in Florida. Florida is a scarier place than Australia because of all the things that you guys have there. And I'm like, really? And then we started doing a comparison, and I'm like, yeah, Florida's a pretty scary place, and so, we've
I mean,
done
I know
some,
you've got your big swamp puppies, but I'm not sure what else, what he's
well,
specifically afraid of.
so in Florida, so not only do we have alligators, we have saltwater crocs. Not quite as big as Australia, but we still got them. They've found caimans now as well. We also have these giant like
Mhm.
Gila monsters and
Spectacle
giant
caiman.
like man-eating lizards around. We have falling iguanas that when it gets too cold, they fall out of the tree, they hit you in the head and they knock you out. Pythons and boas taking over the Everglades.
It's like our myths about drop bears. Sorry to
Right?
interrupt, but
Yeah. Anacondas, they found anacondas in another river. There was an island around Orlando in the middle of this lake where they filmed a movie, like, back in the '90s, and then they left the monkeys there. Well, they've escaped the island, and they've, like, going through terrorizing towns. A
oh
kangaroo
my
got
god.
loose in Kissimmee, Florida, not too long ago, and then we have the inevitable Florida man. So if you're into Florida man news, Google that, and any day of the week in
Yes, I
Florida
see
man,
that.
and Florida man throws alligator through fast food restaurant drive-through window, and things like that. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just
we're
an average Tuesday, right?
it's just a regular
That's what you
Tuesday
do
in
when you're
Florida.
bored.
But,
Oh, man. I actually have heard of a few of those things because my son likes to sometimes haven't watched it for ages, but for a little while, we were watching some videos from some YouTube guy that explores the Everglades at
mhm,
nighttime, and
barefoot?
so yeah, and he picks up a spectacled caiman and, like, all these other things. He goes and boops a alligator on the nose, and I've had to teach my son, okay, if you go and you find spiders and things around school and you're looking at them, just don't boop them, okay? You
Yeah,
can look at them, just don't boop them.
don't poop then.
And then the other day we found a white-tailed spider in our house, and we were like, oh, it's a time to meet Jesus spider.
Yes.
Pretty bad. So killed that one. Usually we catch and release, but I was like, sorry,
Gabby's
sorry.
dad just got bit by a spider. Gabby's dad got
How
bit by
funny.
a brown recluse, and his foot blew up to the size of, like, a
Oh,
basketball, and he was on some heavy, heavy duty antibiotics and stuff, and they were like, "This was pretty bad, dude, like,
well,
you're
glad he
lucky."
came through that. We certainly have our creatures here to rival Florida, but I have heard the myths and the legends about Florida, so
I'll tell you most of them
I
are the
will.
myth, they're true. They're very true.
Well, you stay safe from Florida man and all the other things that are around. And I just thank you so much again for your time. And I really look forward to being able to share this conversation with both of our audiences.
Absolutely, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to your audience out there. We did interviews quite a few years ago for some Australian news and stuff, and it was great because I was able to curse apparently on TV. I kind of let some things slip, and they were like, "No, we welcome it here." So thank you. Maybe one day we'll get a chance to visit.
Yes, well, let me know if you do. But in the meantime, yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.